For decades, a direct U.S. military strike on Venezuela was completely off the table. It was, for all intents and purposes, unthinkable. Then, in the span of just a few hours, the unthinkable happened. We're going to pull back the curtain on the real story here, a story of oil, currency, and a global power struggle that just hit its boiling point. So picture this. It's the dead of night, January 3rd. U.S. Special Forces pull off a lightning-fast raid right into the heart of Caracas. Their target? President Nicolas Maduro himself. And they get him. Now, this wasn't just some warning shot. This was a stunning, decisive move that completely shattered decades of American foreign policy. And that, of course, leads to the billion-dollar question. Why now? I mean, after all these years of sanctions, of diplomatic pressure, what was the final trigger? The answer isn't what you might think. It's not just about politics. It's really about the US dollar, it's about oil, and a global power shift that finally forced America's hand. To really understand why this raid happened, we have to rewind a little bit. It all starts with a US policy that was supposed to cripple Venezuela, but instead, it backfired, creating a brand new problem that Washington just couldn't ignore anymore. Okay, at the center of this whole thing is something called the petrodollar system. It sounds complicated, but it's actually pretty simple. For decades, there's been one golden rule in the global economy. If you want to buy or sell oil, you have to do it in US dollars. This isn't just some friendly agreement, it's the very foundation of America's economic power. It forces every country to need and hold dollars, basically making the US the gatekeeper of the world's energy supply. So, knowing this, the US launched what it called a maximum pressure campaign. They hit Venezuela with sanctions designed to cut the Maduro regime off from the dollar. The goal was simple: starve them of cash, force the government to collapse. But here's where things got interesting. It had a massive unintended consequence. Instead of folding, Venezuela figured out a way to survive completely outside the American financial system. Cut off from the West. Where do you think Venezuela turned? They turned east. And that is where China saw a huge opportunity, stepping in with an economic lifeline that was about to change the entire game. And we are not talking about small numbers here. We're talking about a staggering $62 billion in Chinese loans pouring into Venezuela. This wasn't just a friendly loan. Beijing basically became Caracas's #1 financial backer. Think about that. More than half of all Chinese lending in all of Latin America went to this one country. So what did that $62 billion buy China? Well, it bought them oil. A lot of oil. With Western markets totally closed off, China became the default customer, buying up a massive 80% of all Venezuelan oil exports. Venezuela's most precious resource was now flowing directly to Beijing, and the whole transaction was happening outside of U.S. control. And this, right here, is the absolute key. This is the part most people miss. The entire game had changed. See, instead of trading oil for U.S. dollars, Venezuela was now selling it to China for Chinese yuan. This new setup didn't just sidestep American sanctions. It was a direct shot at the foundation of the petrodollar system itself. And that, my friends, was a threat the U.S. simply could not let slide. Okay, so the strategic threat was growing for months, even years. But in the final 24 hours before the raid, something specific happened. Something that seems to have been the immediate trigger that finally set everything in motion. On the evening of January 2nd, President Maduro is hosting a high-level Chinese delegation, all smiles and handshakes. Just a few hours later, before the sun even comes up on January 3rd, U.S. forces are on the ground in Caracas. The timing, well, it sends a pretty clear message, doesn't it? And it wasn't just us who noticed. News outlets all over the world immediately connected the dots. This quote here from ABC News really sums up what everyone was thinking. That meeting with the Chinese envoy wasn't just another diplomatic photo op. It was the last straw. The way the U.S. responded made it obvious this wasn't just about arresting one guy. No, this was about something much, much bigger. This was about America reasserting control over a region it has always considered its own backyard. And they didn't even try to hide it. The Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, basically said the quiet part out loud. This was a direct message to China, to Russia, to anyone else listening. It was a 21st century reboot of the Monroe Doctrine, the long-standing U.S. policy that says the Americas are off limits to foreign powers. So, when you put all the pieces together, the real goals of this operation become incredibly clear. This was about stopping China and Russia in their tracks. It was about protecting the power of the US dollar, and it was about taking back control of one of the planet's biggest oil reserves. More than anything, it was a message to the world. American dominance in this hemisphere is not up for negotiation. Look, what happened in Caracas isn't just a story about Venezuela. Not at all. It was a single, dramatic move on a much larger global chessboard. A new great game for resources, influence, and power. If we break it down, the scorecard is pretty straightforward. For the US, the raid was a clear win. They reasserted control and took out a problematic regime. For China, it was a huge setback. Billions of dollars in investments are now at risk, and they lost a key ally. And for Venezuela? Well, Venezuela just learned the hard way that it's now a pawn in a much larger struggle between superpowers. And all of this leaves us with one massive, lingering question. Was this raid on Caracas just a one-time thing, or was it the opening shot of a new kind of Cold War, one fought not with ideologies but with currencies, contracts, and control over the resources that power our world? What do you think?